Okay, moving on now to communications. How does it flow? Well, communications management is about information needs being met. It's about exchange of information. And so it's to ensure that information needs are met through the artifacts and activities of project management. So there are really two parts. One is developing the strategy, and the other is carrying out the activities to implement that strategy. So it's going to do it in three processes: plan, manage, and monitor communications. Notice in planned communications, or no, managed communications, what is communications? It isn't, again, a cell phone list, an email list. It can be helpful, but it's not what I'm talking about in communications. What I mean are reports. Create, collect, distribute, store, retrieve, and dispose of information that you've analyzed, often through reports. Okay. So here are some key concepts according to the PMBOK Guide for Consideration. The exchange of information is either intended or involuntary. So be aware of that. It can be involuntary. It can be a written form. It can be formal or informal, internal or external, hierarchical, up and down, through media or your choice of words. So project managers actually spend most of their time communicating, and it builds a bridge by using effective communication between diverse stakeholders. Think about it. I'm building a bridge every time I communicate in some fashion. It's going to help develop relationships, I mentioned, through the artifacts and activities. In two parts, I mentioned develop a strategy and implement that strategy. And it's also going to seek to prevent misunderstandings via what I call the 5 C's: correct, concise, clear, coherent, and controlled. Okay? So the fundamental attributes of communication: clarity, understanding, and monitoring. Okay? Communication, like every other lesson, can also be tailored, and there are trends involved. The trends involve the inclusion of stakeholders in the project, the inclusion of stakeholders in meetings, perhaps, the use of social computing and multifaceted approaches. More on that on page 364. Tailoring, though, is done for stakeholders. You may even tailor based on the physical location where the members are located. Are they geographically separated? What about the communications technology that you have to use? You may have to tailor your project for that. Perhaps tailor your project for language issues or concerns. And of course, knowledge management. Does the organization have a formal knowledge management repository? And if so, is it even used? Okay. Now we're going to start then with plan communications management. In section 10.1, page 366 of the PMBOK Guide. And when you plan communications management, the activities are based on information needs, right? And this is a documented approach to meeting those needs, engaging the stakeholders, presenting relevant information that's timely, very important, information that is what I call OBE, overcome by events. That's not timely. I can't act on it at this point. And so you may plan communications periodically throughout the project, not just the first time. Okay? You'll do it, of course, early in the project life cycle, and you should review it at the start of each project phase. So again, at the beginning of each project phase, you will identify stakeholders, and that would be a good time to do that. Now, moving to inputs for planned communications. It includes the project charter. Again, there are key stakeholders on the charter listing some roles and responsibilities. The project plan is a key input, especially in resource management. And we just talked about the stakeholder engagement plan. Remember the desired state and the current state, and how can I move them from the current state to the desired state? That's the stakeholder engagement plan. And so I want to use things like that to plan my communications. There's also project documents that are an important part of this, including requirements and, of course, the stakeholder register, EEFs, and OPAs. Now, the tools I'm going to go over in some detail in the next few lessons, so I won't go into them too much right now, but there they are listed collectively for you. We're going to start with communications requirements analysis in this part of the lecture. Then my outputs. So think of my process. What's the process called? Plan communication. Oh, I misspelled. Plan communications management. What's my output? My communication management plan. I just moved the words around. The process is plan comm management. My output is comm management plan. Just moving the words around. And then I give some examples. It tells me who should receive comms, what comms they should receive, how often, how will the information flow. In the WAS, remember that's the work authorization system, or via reports. And then I'm also so I have three outputs: communications management plan, my project management plan updates, and my project document updates. Examples are listed there. Now, the first tool I said I would talk about, so I'll go back and look at the tools. Communication requirements analysis. That's the type and format of information based on comm channels and organizational charts. So let me show you an example of communication requirements analysis. And I'm going to do this. Why would I do this? Well, it's to avoid unproductive exchanges and to determine project complexity. That will help me understand and justify resources and budgets, etc. So I can either draw out my comm channels or I can use a formula. Let's draw first. So if I have 8 comm channels, that means I have 8 people. You can count them there. Well, the person on top, called the project manager, can communicate with the next person, who can communicate with the next, and the next, down to the other end of the table, and they can go around. That's one comm channel. Another would be if, say that's project manager at the top, who went directly to those key people. But then the person at the bottom of the table could also go directly to those other people, and etc., and etc. You can see the comm channels can get very complex quickly. And so instead of drawing it out, and that was just for 8, what if you had 492, like on a project I had one time? No can do, bird dog. So I choose to use a formula. And on the test, my tests, or on tests in the PMBOK guide for the PMP exam, you will use a formula. And the formula for the number of communication channels, which is a part of communication requirements analysis, is n times n minus 1 divided by 2. N being the number of stakeholders. So I have 8 stakeholders times 8 minus 1, which is n minus 1, divided by 2. In this case, gives me 28 communications channels for these 8 people. Now, here's an example of 4 stakeholders, including the project manager. Of course, you are a stakeholder. And so again, using the formula n times n minus 1 divided by 2, in this case, I get 4 stakeholders is 6 comm channels, because it would be 4 times 4 minus 1 is 3, that's 12, divided by 2 is 6. 6 comm channels, and you can see them drawn there. But no more drawing, let's just use the formula. I want you to pause the video if you choose and answer these 3 questions to determine the number of communication channels in your comm requirements analysis. Okay, well, hopefully you paused the presentation, worked these out yourself. The answers are 78, 2346, and 28. 28 stakeholders. And the bottom one, don't forget yourself, the project manager. Okay? And that's all I have for this lesson.